Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Disrupt Your Now with me, your host, Lisa Kipps-Brown. I'm so excited tonight to have Michael Stein as my guest. Michael has done so many amazing things. It's crazy. He's obviously an entrepreneur, but he's been an actor, a writer, a stand-up comedian. He's worked with Academy Award winners, Fortune 500 leaders. He's the host of his own podcast and started a tarp company with $13 in the bank and made $500,000 the first year, or maybe $500,000 in sales. So, Michael, fill in the blanks there about how you got to where you are today.
Okay, well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of why I do a podcast called Long Shot Leaders. It ties into who I am and all that. So I consider myself a long shot. I come from a long line of long shots. My story is my grandmother escaped the Russian concentration camps on the way to America, and my dad was a New York homeless street kid, became a multimillionaire, and then became homeless again. I was born premature, health issues, ADD, ADHD, dyslexia. I was put in a school at UCLA for 6 months called Fernald School for Special Needs Kids until I finally made some progress to get back to a normal school when I was a kid. And I just had a lot of issues, a lot of health issues. So the only success I had at a young age was making people laugh at me or making others laugh. Until, like most American kids, when I was 10 years old, things changed a little bit. I saw the movie Rocky, and I saw, here's a guy like me. He's, not successful. He keeps on trying. He's not, people don't think he's very smart, but, the one thing that he had that I didn't have is that he was physically fit. So I said, I'm going to, make myself physically fit. So every day since then, I started, physical fitness. And by the time I was 16, I became a physical fitness trainer. And I was like, wow, that kind of changed everything for me, because I got really, a bit of like effort plus time equals success other than making people laugh. I was like, wow, you could do something here with, so then I started to get confidence in myself. And I told my high school teacher, even though I was still a poor student at that time, things don't change automatically.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to be like my dad, who was, he was called the Calculator Kid. He went in the 70s. He created multi-million-dollar business before he lost it all, selling calculators up in Canada. I was so like, remember when calculators became small? It was like, wow.
Yeah, no, I was in high school then.
Yeah, so he was known as the Calculator Kid. No, I wanted to be the Calculator Kid. So I said, I want to be an entrepreneur, a stand-up comedian, and an actor. And she said, you might want to work with your hands, because not everybody's meant to do what they want to do. And I was like, screw you, lady. She was nice about it, but I was like, screw it. So the day after I graduated high school, I started my business, which was selling tools like my dad, because my dad, before he started Calculator, he was in the tool business. And I failed miserably. And within 2 weeks. So then I went to City College and studied psychology, theater, and business. Mm-hmm. So within 6 months, I did stand-up comedy. I was 19 years old, and I brought a lot of people there. And it was a successful, routine. But the more was successful as I had a lot of people. So I said, I could do this with nightclubs. Los Angeles, nightclubs was a big thing back in the late 80s. So I became a nightclub promoter, and within 6 months, I became the number one nightclub promoter in my age bracket, 16 to 24 years old. And I was off to the races, and that really got me into my first acting role, playing Dirk Diggler in the Dirk Diggler Story, which is a short film version of Boogie Nights, which I appear in as well. I started to see my friend at the time, Paul Thomas Anderson. He became successful with film. So I said, I'm going to leave my nightclub business, which was very successful. I was doing it for 4 years straight. And I started to segue into documentaries that was into nightclubs. And I went around the country for 4 months doing a documentary on the history of house music. And I started into documentaries. And then I decided I'm going to fully leave that business and become a production assistant, which is a peon basically on film production. Yeah. And I did that for 4 years until I wrote, directed, produced a short film, a dramatic short film that made the first pass of the Academy Awards, didn't make that, but it got me a lot of notice. It got bought by HBO, and it won the 2 biggest film festivals in the world. And then I almost got close to a movie deal, because when you make a short film, they say, hey, what other properties do you have? What other do you have? And I said, here's 3 screenplays. The one screenplay they liked was this gambling movie that, was biography, because I did a gambling movie. I did a gambling, underground gambling casino in Los Angeles, and that was what this screenplay was about. 2 years of development hell, no deal. So I'm getting like, I've been being a nightclub promoter to now a production assistant and a starving filmmaker actor. It's humbling. And I'm saying I got to be an entrepreneur again, but I got to make this film thing work. So I was so disgusted with it. I said, you know what, Hollywood, screw you. I'm going to make the movie that you don't want to make. I had another screenplay. It was an outrageous comedy. And I said, I'm not going to make the gambling one because that's the one you want. I said, I'm going to make one, that nobody wants to make. And I'm not going to sit around waiting for you guys. But the only problem is I was debt and I was broke. So the business I started was selling tarps online because my dad, had all these tools. He was, bouncing back from being homeless. And he said, here's a bunch of tools that catalog. And I saw tarps and I just figured that's something that I could donate to people. It's something that could be adventurous, could be camping, so many different applications. So I said, I'm going to start this business to pay for my film, film called Love Hollywood Style. And with a year, I made $500,000, and I was able to write, direct, produce, and act in a film with Faye Dunaway, Eddie Dick, and Coolio, and many other actors that you've seen. And I said, screw you, Holly, and I made this independent film, and it almost bottomed me out, like emotionally, physically, mentally, and financially with the business I just created. So I said, I got to choose. Mike Rowe talks about this a lot. This guy, that garbage guy. He says, you have to choose between passion and opportunity eventually if you want certain things. So I said, after this Tour de France of this love affair with Hollywood and my, stand-up comedy and everything, I said, I'm going to grow this business. So I grew the business. It's made over $100 million since. And I said, if I was ever going to do a podcast, it'd be about somebody that's gone through the ebb and flow of failure and success. And that's why I do a podcast called Long Shot Leaders. And that's why I guess we're talking here today.
You have an amazing life story, and there's so many places that we could start at, but I think it's so ironic that, you're like, screw you, I'm going to make this, I'm going to show you, and you started the business just so you could do that, and you end up building this hugely successful business. Obviously, you have the skill at sales and communication and that kind of thing, would you say?
Yeah. Your audience is about entrepreneurship, right? About trying to succeed. Okay. Because we talked about in the pregame. I'll take you back. Let's go back in time, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go back on a journey of failure and let's get into some nuts and bolts and bullet points on of success for an example. So my dad was in the tool business in the late 60s, and it was a fledgling tool business. He had a partner named Alan Smith. And he decided to go off in that calculator business in the early 70s, and he left Alan Smith. And then my dad made, I think it was like $3 million within 18 months, which in the early 70s, a lot of money. Called him Calculator Kid and all that. And then he had, I don't know how G-rated you want to get, but he had orgy parties. He had the character, Burt Reynolds' character in Boogie Nights was the character's loosely based on my dad. He had a green house with green Cadillac and green carpet and green artwork on the walls and notorious parties in LA. And he just burned through all that money. And then he was almost done with by the late 70s. But in 1975, that partner that he had in the late 60s, Alan Smith, he started a company called Harbor Freight.
Oh, yeah.
Which turned out to be a multi-billion-dollar company with hundreds of locations all over the planet. And I learned from that because, I'd see the tortoise and the hare. So, and I also learned by my dad's failures, I love my dad. He was like Santa Claus, but he was like Elvis, but he was also like a New York street crooked guy. He was the most untrusty, wonderful guy you'd ever met. It was a juxtaposition between dishonesty and being a street kid, but also a nice guy. But I saw this mistakes. So I said, look, I barely graduated high school, but he never finished the 8th grade. He was homeless when he was a kid. He was put in an orphanage. And he started his first business when he was 13. So I said, I could do that. And I failed, like I told you. But the thing is that time plus effort plus belief in yourself. And I got heavily involved in my early 20s when in personal development. And that's what changed everything, to where it's not a sprint, it's a long distance run. And eventually, you find successes and then you compound those. And that's kind of like my story of looking at my dad's situation, being around, also being the youngest, seeing a lot of car accidents in front of you.
Okay.
And learning from those situations. I think that's part of being a successful entrepreneur. And just because, and if you're going to believe bullshit one way or another, because you know, if you're going to give yourself the triad of emotions, what you focus on, the internal and external words you tell yourself and your physiology, it's a recipe on how to be successful. This is personal development stuff, right? You might as well focus and tell yourself a story of X, Y, and Z means success for me, meaning because my dad was that way, or because I had a learning disability, because I had that, it's only up from here. And that's what that equates. And you focus on that. Your internal dialogue tells you that. Your external, when you talk to somebody, I'm doing a business right here, and because this is the reason why I haven't been successful, and that's how great that story is going to be. Whatever you got to tell yourself, that's what you start to build up, and you build that foundation, that canvas that you fill. To me, that's the foundation of my background and what I've done to be successful in entrepreneurship.
I think that's such a great point about the self-talk, because we get so into cutting ourselves down, you know, and that becomes a habit, and that becomes all you think about. So it's really hard to be successful if you're busy in your own mind telling yourself that you're a loser.
Right. You know, it's Tony Robbins 101, who I've studied with every seminar he's ever done. I've been to Namali and his resort, and I've done the whole gamut of, you know, personal development. And the triad of emotions is like step number one to gear yourself up as an entrepreneur or an artist or a stand-up comedian or anything, to try to get yourself to say, look, first of all, you have to put yourself in the proper recipe, a position to perform. So it's getting your physiology. Everything starts with your body, because you're not going to be able to change your focus as easily, or your words, if you don't change. So you irreverently, you forcefully change your physiology into what is a, you know, chin up, you know, deep breath. That's a recipe for something that's more powerful driven, as to where shallow breathing, head down. That's a recipe for physiology for, you know, crestfallen, you know, negativity. So that's step number one, your focus. You know, like the car, I always say it, the car wreck, they tell race car drivers when they're skidding towards a wall, the first thing to do is turn your eyes automatically, because you're going to want to do something with your hands, but turn your eyes towards the track. Don't, you know, and then your hands are going to follow. So your focus, your physiology, your focus, and then the external and internal words that you say to yourself and others about yourself. That's a triad, and that's the foundation for me. And that's why I think it's so important that, you know, personal development should be taught in schools, you know, and that's a part of entrepreneurship.
I totally agree with you that it should be taught in schools when we're growing up, because we just flounder around. We don't know how to be like that. It's funny that you mentioned race car drivers, because I work with a NASCAR driver, and he's the only driver that races to combat veteran suicide. And so we promote free resources that help veterans and military families live happier, healthier, more financially stable lives. So that's one reason that I appreciate your TARP thing that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. TARP aid, I really appreciate that, because I imagine a lot of the people that you end up helping are people from the military community.
Right. You know, and just the homeless in general is what we really gravitate towards on. And of course, you know, anybody calls out from the military, we give them automatic discount. But the TARP thing started because when I was a nightclub promoter early on, it started from selfish reasons. You know, you're like, how can we get more people? You know, in Los Angeles, there's a heavy homeless so I said, I did a big event, and I did it for like 12 years. Even after I started promoting nightclubs, I still had this big event, turkey soup, the night before Thanksgiving. And I said, everybody comes with a canned food for the homeless, can get them for half price.
Okay.
So we get all these canned foods for the LA mission. And when I stopped promoting nightclubs and I had another product that I was going to try to make money to make that film, my current business, I said, you know, tarps are one of those things. People need them for emergencies. People need them for this or that, or so many different applications. I didn't see it as a boring product. I saw it was like an avenue towards more interesting things. So when I said, you know, that's what we can do also the night before Thanksgiving, I've done this with canned foods. I said, we could donate tarps, because I see them all over, you know, for people that are homeless. So that's exactly what we did. Like year number 2, when we started having more money as a business, and ever since, we're able to donate thousands of tarps to the homeless, because hypothermia, keep them warm, keep them dry.
Yeah.
And we've done that ever since, and it's been like a tradition.
I love that. And, you know, growing up in Virginia in a rural area, even though I lived in Florida and different places, I never was exposed to that many homeless people until I visited LA for the first time about 15 or so years ago. And I was so surprised because, under every overpass and everywhere, and of course, there are a lot more people now because of everything that we've gone through. So the fact that you did that, first that you were doing the turkey soup thing, and then that you added that in, they're just there are so many people that you've helped. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, well, it started with, you grew up with your dad hearing your dad's homeless, and your dad, he ran away from the orphanage when he was 8. And I just, you grew up with that. So I think it was like just something I always kind of gravitated towards. And you build a story for these things that add a little bit more purpose to your life, and it because you're cause celeb, and it's just been something that, you get next things to talk about human development, right? Mm-hmm. Is 6 human need psychology. If you believe like any, which is a Tony Robbins thing as well, that all humans do things for 6 human needs, right? There's love or significance, certainty, uncertainty, love, contribution, and growth, right? So donating the tarps basically feeds my significance. It feeds my sense of contribution and growth and connection, so you try to find positive vehicles to meet those human needs. And that's how those things start. So, anybody else that has a product out there that wants to get a little bit more inertia behind their purpose and their business, it's twofold. You do it to help, but also it helps you, so that's one of the things that drive me.
Yeah. And it's so cool that you took something from your dad's past, that was hard for him and turned it into a positive, a way for you to help other people. My father was blind. And this past summer, we had the first Braille paint scheme car in NASCAR and the first blind-owned sponsor. It was so cool.
How did that work? What was the Braille? What did they do?
What we did is we had over the passenger side window, you have the driver's name. On the passenger side, we had Colin's name in Braille. And then in each number, we had at the bottom left the digit in Braille, like as an awareness thing for people to start thinking about, if people have never been around a blind person, they don't understand the difference in the access, and my friend Hobie Wedler, he's a PhD chemist who was born blind. We were promoting his business. He was just launching a new business this summer. And it was so cool when he was at the first race and was able to feel Colin's name. He could feel the decal, even though it wasn't like standout, 3D Braille. He could feel the decals and he could read it. I have it on video. That was so heart-filling for me. So that's just like a tiny thing of what you're talking about, all the people that you've helped with because of what you saw with your dad.
It moves you, and I can sense you getting a little choked up talking about it too, because we just interviewed on the show last month Curtis Curveball Jackson, not to be confused with 50 Cent Curtis Jackson. And he was blind at birth. And he first I did his podcast, and then he says, I want to pitch you at the end, he's like, I want to pitch you to be on your show. And he started talking to me and he's like, I'm blind. I was like, what? He did the whole interview. I didn't even know he was blind. Yeah. He set up his appointment. He did everything. Everything he's an IT guy. And what he does when he's not rapping, because he also raps. It was amazing. It totally educated me on how blind people can, do anything that we can do, really.
Yeah. And people don't expect that if they've not been around. And it wasn't until I was well into adulthood that I realized that just growing up with my father literally made me think differently. Because every day I was around somebody who never said, I can't do this. Anything he wanted to do, he figured out how to do it. He even had a full wood shop in our basement with a lathe, and he rode horses and shot guns and mowed the grass, And so it just goes to show you, if you want to do something badly enough, you'll figure out a way. And that's why I love your story so much, all the stories within the story, because most people would look at it and go, you had the whole deck stacked against you, because of the ADD and everything thrown in on the other things. And you just, every time you were knocked back, you turned around and came back stronger. I just love that.
I think, it's an old saying, but iron sharpens iron, right? So you take those things and you could either take a negative vehicle towards it or a positive vehicle. And what happened is that growing up with my grandmother, so my dad made all this money and then he lost all the money. So my mom and he had a crazy lifestyle, but he left my mother. She had to go back to work, she's to make the house payments, and because she kept us home in Encino, which is an expensive area. So I had to sleep. I'm the youngest, so I had to sleep in the same room with my grandmother until I was 9 years old. Which is, you'd hear the story about how she escaped the Russian concentration camps every night. That's my, and then I'd wake up to her hocking up in the morning as an alarm clock. So I would, hear that story. My mom, because I was like an oops baby, she felt the need to tell everybody. She's like, my son, he was a mistake. I ran up and down the stairs. I drank, I smoked. And I'm like, Mom, you don't have to tell everybody. You can just tell the waitress if you want, like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
But you hear that, you hear about, how you're lucky to be alive because of that. You're lucky to be alive because of the concentration camps. Mm-hmm. Your dad's a New York homeless street kid, and he went through this and this, and you have it easy. So, and even though I was a basket case, literally with like physically and emotionally, and I had a lot of socially awkward, things to get through. I think you have a gratitude as the key, is the lifeblood of the engine. You grow up with those things, you could say, "Oh, I don't belong here," which I did say that for a long time. But if you get through that stuff and you paint your story, it's like, look, I'm going to use this to my advantage. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about it today with you. And it's like, you know what? I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I use what anybody out there listening, use anything you can to create any story you want to create, because it's just going to help you in the long run. We tell each other's, bullshit all the time. Oh, I don't deserve this, or imposter syndrome. If you're going to tell yourself some bullshit, tell yourself some things that are, be as honest as you can with yourself, but, kind of like push yourself in the direction of positivity, of saying, this is who I really am inside. And this is what this means to me. You could create a meaning for just, and that's what I've done. I've created these meanings saying, look, this has made me stronger and made me better.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's your story. When you own the stuff, whether it's good or bad, it's you. And I always tell people, you are the only person in the world who is like you. Nobody else has your unique set of circumstances and everything. So figure out a way to mold it to your advantage. And that is exactly what you have done.
That's, stand-up comedy helps you with that, because when you're a stand-up comedian, you're first starting out, you're like, how am I going to be different? I need to do what that guy does. I'm like, no, you can't do what anybody does. You need to do it like Richard Pryor or Robin Williams or Billy Crystal. All those guys, they just spilled their guts to who they were. And you say, this is who I am. I can't do anything about it. This is what happened. I'm going to have to find the humor in it. Or if you're an entrepreneur, or you're an actor, or you're, somebody else, a motivational speaker, you got to find the purpose and the value of what that is, to other people, and that's what you can only do what you have. You got to work with it. You could be one of those other, I don't know how to do it any other way. That's all. You just got to be transparent.
Yeah. And I love that you show it even applies to stand-up comedy. It applies to everything, and I tell people, I've noticed, I've been an entrepreneur now for almost 32 years. And the one common denominator that I've seen with business owners who are really miserable in their business is that they built a business that was what somebody else wanted because they copied what everybody else was doing. Right. And not only will you not be happy then, but you won't be as successful if you do what you're meant to do and what's inside you. So those are great points about the stand-up comedy. My son-in-law is actually an improv actor. So so I'll have to tell him to check out your stuff. Let me ask you this. So when you were starting the tarp company to so that you could produce your film, how did you go about starting that? How did you go about selling?
Ooh, man. Okay. So I'm working as a production assistant on, as a PA, it's you get a job for like 4 days and then the job ends. And so like either I get home at night and I'm building a website. Remember Yahoo Stores? It was like Yahoo Store back in 2000. So you're building the website. You're slowly getting ready for this. You're planning, there's no money outlay at that point. I'm just, you get like a couple months free. So I'm building the website whenever I can, after an 18, 19 hour, 20 hour shoot, you got to go home and build that or your time off. And then I had one sale. I was working on a job and I come home and there's, fax all day, the fax order. Great. Yeah. And then I had my convertible Buick Skylark, this old 71 Skylark was beat up, and I pick up the merchandise and I pack it up in UPS and I ship it out. And then you get 2 orders and 3 orders. And one day I'm working out of this rented shack in Sherman Oaks, where I'm living. And I'm getting ready to, I'm writing the screenplay, finishing up the screenplay that I want to make, and I said, this is my film business, this tarp business, right? So then I'm building it up. And then one day I get a call. This really kind of changed that first big sale that the entrepreneurs finally get. This guy calls me up and says, we need $17,500 worth of tarps on Monday. And you got to understand, I'm working paycheck to paycheck. And some of these orders are coming in, they're like $150 here and there. And then he goes, and I said, well, we're the largest tarp supplier. I wouldn't do this now, but you do that back then. You're like, we're the largest tarp supplier in America. So we can get up for you, no problem. He goes, I need it Monday morning. And this is Friday. I'm like, no problem. I call up all the trucking companies. They're like, they're going to want to eat up. Like, yeah, we could do it. We'll ship it there for you for $17,500. I was like, well, that's not going to work. So then I said, okay. I call up a PA friend of mine. I call up Galp and Ford truck rental company. I said, I'm going to rent the truck because that's where I was familiar with getting a truck. I said, can you come with me? I said, I need you to come with me across the country. I'm going to pick up the tarps from my supplier. We're going to leave right now. I'm going to pick you up in an hour. He goes, well, I'm getting $175 a day. I said, I can cover that. I'll pay you $200 a day. We'll be gone for 4 days. I said, I'm going to pick you up in an hour. It's going to be fun. I said, no problem. So he goes, done. So I pick up the truck from Galpin Studio Rental. I pick up the tarps from the supplier. I pick up my PA friend. I drive, no sleep, 72 hours, Friday night. I pick him on set. I pick him up on a commercial set in the Valley where they were shooting a commercial. He left there. And then we deliver the tarps Monday morning before they open the gates to this factory that bought them. And the guy says, I thought you were going to be here. He had an accent. He said, I didn't think you were going to be here until tomorrow. I was like, oh my God. We were like bags in our eyes. And I remember that was a big sale. I cried after we delivered it was just before Christmas time, like right around now. And I cried because I don't have to worry about rent. I think this business is going to work, because you never know as an entrepreneur. And that kind of put wind in my sails. And now I go, flash forward to maybe a year and a half to 2 years after that. I made $1 million in a day with the state of Florida for the hurricanes that were in Florida. And I sat back and I said, you know what? You always want something and you think that things are going to change with that. Let me tell you something. You can make $1 million in one day. You can make $17,000, without getting any sleep. What is going to really push you forever, no matter how much money you make, is gratitude.
Yeah.
That's what happens first. And then you can make money and then also passion. So gratitude and passion, if anybody's listening, is like, well, I already know that. No, we really need to put this in your nervous system because conceptually we might know it, but every day, if you really kind of practice it when times suck. Hey, look, I had a tough time the other day. It was something happened online. We migrated our system to Shopify Plus from our custom solution. We got a hiccup. I come home at night and I do well. And you still hit those valleys, right?
Yeah.
And I've watched the movie Rocky, which is the impetus to this podcast, right? And I've seen it a million times. I had to see a psychologist when I was a kid because I was watching that movie so much. And I said, you know what, Mike, I haven't seen this film. I watch like once a year. I said, I'm in the gym. I said, I'm going to put that on. And I watched it. And I was like, you know what? I'm about 45% more passionate than I was before. You do whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's my little bullet points on your mindset is you got to work it in your nervous system, because a lot of people say, yeah, I know about mindset. There's intellectual knowledge and there's physical knowledge. Intellectual knowledge where somebody tells you a concept and you get it, but you got to taste the strawberry over and over again. So you're like, I know exactly, I can feel the texture of the seeds. I know what it tastes like. It's the sugar content in my mouth. That's the physical knowledge. And that's what you need to do with entrepreneurship.
So there are several great lessons in that. Number one is, even like you had the opportunity, and instead of saying, I can't do it, you said, I can. And then you figured out a way to make it happen. And then the fact that, what was I don't remember the second one, but the last one about gratitude. And in business, it has to be about more than money, because there's always going to be somebody who has more. People who are so hung up on the belongings and how much money they're going to make. There's never enough. You always have to have a bigger reason and a bigger purpose. So I just love that. And I mean, I could talk to you forever, because you have like a million stories, even within one little story. But
You
I
know,
just
I think
appreciate
the most important thing, the value is say, look, if we wanted to encapsulate that part of it and say, listen, gratitude and passion, lifeblood of the engine. Get yourself to the triad of emotions, getting yourself in position to take action. Okay. Understanding personal development, but then also saying to yourself, look, I mean, there's like 1,000 crossroads every day that you're going through, and you hold that procrastination's a big one, right? Or you're not doing this. Trigger stimulus and response, triggering your body, learning how to take the concept of the intellectual knowledge, and then getting it to physical knowledge where you're used to taking that immediate action all day long. That's the trick. You got to get your reps in and be cognizant of that, because that's really what entrepreneurship is about in the long run. You say, well, I understand that. Or I did that seminar, and you take all these notes and then you do all that stuff. But unless you're really forcing yourself and then cognizant of like, oh, this is the crossroads, there's a procrastination, and you got to irreverently push yourself towards taking the action. That's, I think, the biggest thing, because everybody listening to this going, nah, I get that concept. It's the physical knowledge that you have to constantly force yourself to take action, and turning your head towards the track. You got to do that constantly every time throughout the day where you feel like you're not achieving your goals.
That's a great way to end this. I love it. Thank you so much for spending the time with me, Michael. Your stories are amazing, and now I want to go look into you even more. Tell everybody how they can find out more about you.
Just go to longshotleaders.com. That's my website for the podcast. And basically, I got all my social on there. And what I really want to do is just tell people, if you have a long shot story, if you found, it doesn't have to be monetary success, any type of success where you've overcome large obstacles to find any kind of massive success, spiritually, financially, physically, mentally, a juxtaposition between where you started to where you are now. Let us know that story. I want to have you on the podcast.
That would be great. I know a lot of people that I can refer over. So
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael. I really appreciate you being here. And thanks to everybody in the audience for joining us today. I'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.